My neighbor decided our fence was optional. It started 3 weeks after I moved into my first house. I'd saved for 7 years to afford this place. Small backyard, quiet street, perfect for my 2 dogs. Then I met Caleb. The first time I caught him in my yard, he was picking tomatoes from my garden. I walked outside and just stared at him. He looked up at me like I was the one trespassing. "Oh, you don't mind, do you? My wife loves fresh tomatoes." I told him I actually did mind. He laughed and walked back through the gap in our shared fence like I'd told a joke. The next week, I came home from work to find his lawn chairs set up in my backyard, his actual furniture, on my grass. When I confronted him, he shrugged. "Your yard gets better afternoons, son. Mine's too shady." I asked him to move his stuff. He said he would. He didn't. I moved it myself. Put everything back on his side of the fence. The next morning, it was back in my yard, along with a cooler and a small table. I went to his door. Caleb answered with a beer in his hand at 10 a.m. "Look," he said before I could speak, "the fence is basically just a suggestion. We're neighbors. What's yours is mine. That's not how property works." He closed the door in my face. I installed security cameras that weekend. What I captured made my blood boil. Caleb was using my yard constantly. He'd come over while I was at work and sunbathe. He let his friends park in my driveway when he had parties. He even started storing his extra garbage cans behind my shed. I called the police. They said it was a civil matter. I talked to a lawyer. She said I could sue, but it would cost more than it was worth. I put up no trespassing signs. Caleb took them down and threw them in my recycling bin. Then he crossed a line I couldn't ignore. I came home one Friday to find my dogs locked in my bathroom. Caleb had let himself into my house through the back door, which I'd accidentally left unlocked, and moved my dogs so they wouldn't bother him while he used my patio. He was grilling on my patio. With my grill, using my propane, I lost it. Started screaming at him to get off my property. He just flipped a burger and told me to relax. "Your dogs were barking. I was doing you a favor." I called the police again. This time they came. Caleb played innocent. Said I'd given him permission months ago. Said we were friends. Said I was overreacting. The officers told us to work it out like adults and left. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how this man had invaded every part of my life and faced 0 consequences. Then I remembered something. Caleb had mentioned once that he worked from home, some kind of insurance sales job. He was always on calls during the day, which I could hear through my office window. I did some research. Turns out Caleb sold insurance for a company that had very strict policies about agent conduct, professional behavior, ethical standards, background checks. I also discovered that Caleb's company had a customer complaint line that took anonymous tips very seriously, so I compiled my footage. Every single instance of Caleb trespassing, him taking my tomatoes, him moving into my yard, him entering my home without permission. I wrote a detailed letter explaining that Caleb, their licensed agent, had been breaking into his neighbor's property, trespassing repeatedly, and entering homes without consent. I sent everything to his company's ethics department, their HR division, and their state licensing board. Then I waited. 2 weeks later, I was working from home when I heard shouting next door. I looked out my window. Caleb was on his phone, pacing his driveway, screaming about how this was ridiculous, and he didn't do anything wrong. He hung up and punched his own garage door. 3 days after that, a moving truck showed up. Caleb's wife came over while they were loading boxes. She looked exhausted. "He lost his license," she said quietly. "Company fired him. He can't sell insurance in this state anymore." I asked where they were moving. "Her parents' basement, 2 states away. It's all we can afford now." She walked back to help load the truck. Caleb saw me watching from my porch. He stormed over, face red, veins popping. "You did this. You ruined my life over a stupid fence." I looked at him calmly. "The fence was never the problem, Caleb. You were." He stood there shaking, like he wanted to hit me. Then his wife called his name, and he turned away. I watched them drive off that afternoon. The new neighbors moved in a month later. Nice couple. They asked if I minded them replacing the old fence with something taller. I said that sounded perfect.